الكاميرا بس بعيدة شوية. طيب, good afternoon everyone, and it gives me a great pleasure to introduce Dr. Hesham. And I think more or less everyone here has already spoken with Dr. Hesham at one point or another. وطبعا I don't want to take من the time اللي Dr. Hesham is going to use for the presentation. Everyone has seen his bio. It's a great pleasure and honor to have Dr. Hesham with us here. So without any further delay, thank you, Dr. Hesham. Already spoken Dr. Hesham at one point or another. طبعا I don't want to take time Dr. Hesham is going to use for the presentation. Everyone has seen his bio. It's a great pleasure and honor to have Dr. Hesham with us here. So without any further delay,
actually it was a delay.
sorry about this.
So without further delay,
Speakers. I'm so sorry about this, Dr. Hesham. Very sorry. We're very sorry إن إحنا this speakers are off. If anyone is using the computer, can you please switch it off?
اوكي شكرا جدا على الانترودكشن دكتور سمحة وشكرا على
If anyone is using the computer, can you please switch it off?
Are we okay?
قافل السبيكرز.
Yeah. Okay. I think we worked out all the technical difficulties. شكرا للبرسون على coordinating this event. It's the first talk I give here, so I just want to say thank you for the opportunity. There is a delay, right? So we're getting two versions of it. think we worked out all the technical issues. Oh, we haven't. Coordinated this event where first talk I give here.
انت ليه قفلت؟ انت قفلت على النكست؟
لا مش حلو.
خلاص اللايف ستريم نبقى نشوف هنقفله ازاي بعدين. ازاي انتوا بس نقفل المايك. اقفل المايك خالص. دكتور هشام ممكن نتكلم بالمايك. لان انا شاكه
Okay.
We can try it دلوقتي.
Hear the mic?
Can we try it?
I think I can use my teacher's voice. I think. Okay, without the mic, so let's get started. I'm sorry it's taken too long to get things going, but I'm very excited about this topic, and I'm very excited to share that with you. The presentation will not go into a lot of details. I just want to keep it engaging and you know, so hopefully I'll get some feedback for you during the lecture as well. There are three parts of this talk. The first one is more of a welcoming introduction to what we're talking about here, just a general motivation background. And then the second part talks about how we are addressing the key problem that we are sharing with you today, which is basically how to extract useful knowledge from raw data using big data analytics. And then the third part would be examples of case studies in which we are actually taking advantage of this approach and trying to do something new and different using this method. So the first few slides is just very general introduction. I really believe these are really the best time, particularly for our students, for our junior researchers. These are great times for higher education. When I started my career in higher education, there used to be a lot of isolation of higher education, the ivory tower concept. Industry and academia and government and students and faculty, everybody was doing something separate. So I think we are at a really, really good time now to work together. So it's safe to say that higher education is going through a transitional, even transformational phase in which we are fulfilling our obligation of helping the society to move forward. It's not just about educating the basics, but actually make, I would say, even life better for everybody. So higher education has never been given the opportunity that you are given today. You hear terms like community engagement, student success, interdisciplinary work. We are really well positioned to do something significant. And it's up to all of us collectively and individually to take advantage of these opportunities and do something significant. Obviously, a big part of it will be how to work with our constituencies, particularly industry partners, government, high schools, all education-related people. So again, there is an appreciation for education now that was not maybe present decades ago. It used to be the notion that we don't really need degrees because we can educate people in the company. You don't hear that anymore. There are a lot more appreciation for what education can help companies achieve. And of course, in the realm of things, I want to focus on science and technology. All education are wonderful, but I think we are particularly given an opportunity to do something significant in the STEM area, particularly in science and education. I've shown this picture to some of you already. This was in during a visit for former students in Alibaba in Hangzhou, China, talking about science and technology are the greatest drivers of social goods. This is just a major statement because social goods is what keep the society going, is what make the engines moving. And now it is us who's driving the society forward. It is scientists and technologists. So it's a pretty significant statement. I really believe in it. There has to be, I mean, obviously we have scientists here, we have engineers, we have computer scientists. When I talk about information technology, I'm using it in a broader sense. And there is a term that has been used for many, many years. It's called the queen and servant of sciences. It started in the 14th century with philosophy as the queen and servant of science. And through the years, different disciplines kind of carry that flag. There is an argument that the concept of computing, technology, IT, is a current carrier of that flag, of being servant and queen. And the reason why we use these two terms, because servant means you're helping people achieve their day-to-day activities. And then the queen means that we are helping to move forward at the global sense. So we are helping the little short goals, but also the big pictures. And the reason for this, obviously, is that computing and informatics now is penetrating every discipline, is empowering every discipline. No matter what you do, you use technology, you use computing. So it is the science of this generation. But there are some challenges. This penetration, this marriage between IT, some aspects of engineering and mathematics in different disciplines is not that easy, because you're combining things of different natures. So it will take some time, it will take some effort to make this possible. And don't underestimate the importance of availability of data and how it pushes machine learning and artificial intelligence to the front end more than ever before. The opportunities are limitless. In every discipline, you see technologies that will really shape the future of our society, whether it's in transportation, whether it's in healthcare, which is obviously the most important aspect of health is the most important things we have. And of course, education and all other things. You can read that stuff, but we have so many opportunities in order to do this. And this notion of education for all, discovery for all, again, decades ago when we started as undergraduates, this concept of discovery or education was limited to select group of elite research centers and universities. You have to go to MIT and Stanford and maybe Cambridge or some of the technical universities in Germany. There are few places in the world in which discoveries really happen. That's not the case anymore. You can do discoveries at all levels. I know I mentioned to some of you already that in a few summers ago, we had high school students that were part of research projects, and they actually end up publishing papers in an international conference before even going to a university. The availability of data and the availability of tools is leveling the playing field to some degree. You don't need to be in a major research lab to have access to data to conduct research. You don't have to be in a hospital to have access to data related to infectious disease or cancer or diabetes or high blood pressure. So the availability of data and the tools are really empowering everyone in every university, in every school, to be part of this movement, to innovate and discover and empower students. At the center of this is concept of big data analytics, because it's all possible because we have data we didn't have before. The question is, can we take advantage of this data? Can we make it do what we want it to do? So I really believe that big data analytics, the concept of squeezing knowledge out of this raw data, is a big deal. It is something that maybe as of now, within the IT domain, is probably the single most outstanding scientific question. Many things we do at the end of the day is going to come down to early diagnosis of disease. Well, that's extracting knowledge from data. advancing transportation. How can we push the limits in terms of physics and integrated circuits? It is all about leveraging raw data and extracting knowledge from it. So many advancements in these applications are really going to come down to how successful we are in converting pieces of maybe what could be viewed as disconnected pieces of data into a cohesive and useful knowledge that we can take advantage of and advance our systems. We're going to use the word computing and informatics a lot, and IT, and there are different ways of viewing this, but one key point of what I would like to share with you today, I believe that working together is going to be a key. We cannot do this alone. We cannot do this in isolation. People have to collaborate. So one way to approach IT, one way to view it as a tree with roots and branches. And you can think of the roots at the computational aspect or the computing aspect. And then the informatics is our Ministry of External Affairs, if you might say. This is how we reach out and connect with others. This is how we establish partnerships with all other disciplines. That's how bioinformatics emerged. That's how engineering informatics emerged. That's how cybersecurity emerged. It is how to integrate fundamental concepts of computing with different disciplines to create new informatics. In the US, our university was part of a unit for IT, but there are different models to implement IT. Some universities really focus on the roots of this tree, and they call themselves C schools and computing school. Carnegie Mellon, UC Irvine, several universities. Basically, it's just a glorified computer science department. It's not really an IT college or an IT school. And then you get schools that call themselves I schools, as an information school, Drexel, Syracuse, and many other places in which they really did this at the expense of that. But branches without roots don't really work very well. So we were promoting the concept of an IC school that has the informatics piece, but also stands on a firm shoulders of a C components. You need to have strong computational foundation, engineering foundation, mathematical foundation, and then you can build your interdisciplinary focus on it. And I think this is the longer route, but this is a more sustainable route. So that's just a way of thinking about the difference between computing and informatics. Again, it's all about data. It's all about how to find a way to extract good things out of this data. But unfortunately, in science, collecting data is the main topic. I mean, I remember when I was in high schools and college, you go for a field trip, it's about collecting data. Many scientific disciplines focus on data collection a lot. I think it's time for us to create a balance between data and I don't know, I have a picture here that shows that we are so heavy right now on generating data. Every aspect in our life, we have sensors for the engineering audience here. So sensors collect tons and tons of it. And I'll show you some information later on about some of the case studies about safety of bridges. They have tons of sensors in all new bridges. And when I ask them, what do you do with this data? And they point at a closet right behind them. That's where we keep all our data. What do you do with it? Very little. So data generation is taken over. And we need to continue to do this, but we have to find a way to use it. And that's the data analytics part. The two pictures that I skipped are kind of interesting, but I'll go quickly on this. In science, we used to do a lot of what we call hypothesis-driven. We need to have an idea what we want to do, have a concept, and we conduct an experiment to prove it or disprove it. With the availability of data now, we have an alternative or a complementary approach, which is called data-driven. You can narrow down your search space by finding patterns in the data that will tell you where to look. So instead of looking for a needle in a haystack, it's going to be a needle in a much, much smaller stack that's manageable to do. So combining these two concepts by leveraging data, but also take advantage of the scientific knowledge, we can do things much faster. So instead of looking for, if you look for a gene associated with a disease, we have 20, 30,000 genes. But if we have data that will tell us that we can only have 20 that are related to this. Then you can do this in weeks instead of years. I think I may have mentioned to some of you before, my first bioinformatics project was a grant from NIH to find a relationship between genes and disease. And we have a 3-year funding from NIH for close to $1 million. And this project, if we have to do it now, it will probably take us 2 weeks. And maybe, graduate students, if you know how expensive graduate students are, but not $1 million in 2 weeks. Because we can accelerate the progress. So not only we can discover new things, but even the things that we could have discovered before, we can do it much faster. And that would, but it all comes down to going from here to here. When I shared this picture with some of my colleagues, he told me, oh, because of your Egyptian roots, you like pyramids. But this is known as a data pyramid, even in data mining, which is going from data to information to knowledge and then to decision. We reach really the top when we can make decisions that are based on data, not based on ad hoc approaches, which I'm going to talk about that in the case studies. A lot of the things we do now is based on try and error and ad hoc. We don't need to do that now because we have enough information to be specific, to target our, whether it's a piece of technology, whether it's treatment, or whether it's education approach. So obviously there are challenges. I'm just going to go over this really quickly. How to get domain experts and technologists, engineers, and IT to work together to make this progress. There are some technical challenges, and also collaboration is not easy because everybody has a comfort zone. But let's not focus on the challenges. Let's focus on the opportunities. So we're going to talk about big data analytics, and the data comes in different shapes and forms. I'm sure you've heard the term big data. That's coming all over the place now. This is actually the current administration is allocating billions of dollars for big data research. And the good news is that this is good for everyone to be part of this. The bad news is that the term big data is not accurate because big data tends to push people towards size, that is just volumes of data. But if you go deeper into the concept of big data, it's a complexity of data. It's the heterogeneity of data. It's what it carries inside. So one way to do this, people like to kind of use something to remind people to do it. So they use words that start with a V, and they call them the 5 V's of big data. Volume is one of them. Obviously, we have large data now, so we cannot ignore that. But we also have variety. Data comes in videos, in images, in sequences, in spoken languages. So how would you integrate different types of data in order to come up with something useful? The veracity. Not all the data that we have are fully trusted. Some data we really can rely on, some not so much. So not only the different types, but different levels of trust. It comes at different shape. It comes at a higher rate. By the time we analyze something, more data is coming. So it's a moving target. And of course, now data is value. People are buying data these days. It has monetary aspects, so there is value. So it's very complex. So we need to come up with an approach that allow us to analyze at different levels, at the individual levels, at the group levels. So we have to use what I call moment granularity levels on this. So really, that's the first part of the talk. I hope I got you interested, or I got you to believe that this is really an important issue, that we are in a good spot in the history of science. But in order to take advantage of this, we need to work hard. So how to do it? How to actually squeeze knowledge, decision-making, precision out of this raw data that we have available to us? We need to come up with a model that is robust, that is general, that is powerful. And I'm proposing using graphs and complex networks in order to do this. We use networks and graphs interchangeably. Complex networks usually are graphs with a property. They are not just random graphs. They're graphs with the purpose. So we need this in order to do that. And one key point I want to highlight is people view the complexity of data as a challenge. How do we deal with the size? how are we going to deal with that complexity, with the heterogeneity, with the different levels of trust? I think this model, if we use it well, we can actually take advantage to turn it around. It's not just a challenge, it's actually an opportunity. And if we have more time later on after this talk, I can show you that this model potentially can benefit from all the aspects of the disease that comes. And this is really a big deal, is when you have more data, you're not just scaling the solution to make it work instead of 100 elements for 1,000,000 elements. I want the solution for the original 100 elements to get better because now I have 1,000 elements or 1,000,000 elements. And that's new. So it's not just I can solve a problem for 10. Now you give me 100 or 1,000 or 1,000,000. I need to find a way to scale my solution. I want to be able to improve the solution for the original core, which is a different way of looking at big data analytics. It has to get better, not just scaled up. And we have to take advantage of the variety because every problem has different angles. And you cannot fully describe complex problems as one thing. So you have to make sure that every additional piece of data improve your ability to solve the problem. Same thing with velocity, you're bringing more data. Same thing with velocity, because you can have weights, you can have different ways to manufacture or to manipulate the different data sets, which is something that Pintos and Graph can do. So this is sort of the second part, which we're talking about, that we are going to use graph modeling. We're going to use complex networks to do this. And use it under the umbrella of what I call population analysis. In daily life, it's hard to assess things in isolation. I mean, your teachers or students, if you say, I have really a good student, usually underneath that statement, it's good as compared to the rest. Or sometimes when they are asked as a teacher to write a teaching, a recommendation letter, you say, this student one of the top 5% among all the students I've had. So we do a lot of things in terms of context. Same thing, students. You say, oh, this is a great teacher, or this is an easy topic as compared to the rest of the topics. So the question is, why can't we use that context-based method, that population-based method, to also analyze data? So let it work for us. And we can build systems using networks and graphs as our building blocks, and try to see within that system, we can zero in and out in order to assess things. So that's really the basic concept. Graphs are known to model pretty much everything because you can dissect any problem into elements and relationships between those elements. The elements can be your nodes, and the relationships can be your edges. You can have thicker edges, thinner edges, you can have big nodes, you can have small nodes, you can have different shapes and forms. So graphs can accommodate the different aspects of complex problems. And what we discover when we start modeling problems with graphs, the graphs that we generate are not random graphs. They become graphs with properties. For example, this graph is actually a protein-protein interaction network, which is how our molecular elements interact with each other. So it's an actual network. You can tell this is not a normal, uniformly distributed network. This network has special nodes. This network has special groups. And this just comes from nature. So in almost all the applications we generate, when we model it by graphs, it turns out that the graphs have properties. They are not just random. There's something infused. There are properties embedded in that we can find a way to extract. So that was sort of a comfortable thought. We use a lot of machine learning and artificial intelligence because the data is too much. Sometimes we have to reduce data, so we use machine learning for reduction. We use more data because AI has to have a learning component. So these are in the background with the data modeling. You need to have the ability to find out which data you use, which data you filter out, because sometimes more is not necessarily better. So the basic concepts of AI and machine learning can guide you during this modeling tool. In a very simplified version, this approach to try to dissect a problem, finding elements and relationships and build networks. And then from the networks, we can analyze them, finding key elements, key groups, finding a path, finding a cluster, finding a hub. And then after that, we analyze those elements, try to sort them out. And usually we do this with the help of a domain expert. And I'll show you that in an example. The domain experts say, you know, I like this group because that has elements that resonate to the science, but I don't like that group. And then after you come up with a solution, you have to validate it. That's really an important aspect of this process, because you're going to generate multiple solutions and not all of them are going to be key. So you have, again, to rely either to, you have to learn about your domain yourself, or you have to rely on your partner or a group of people that will help you. So you have to understand the problem, dissect it, identify elements and relationships, and then you have to analyze the graph, identify which pieces of it are more likely to carry the information you need, and then you have to find a way to validate it. The last edition of Communication with ACM, which is probably one of the most read magazine in computing, that was the cover of September 2021. It says the future is big graphs. So I like that because you use big from big data analytics and use graph from graph modeling. So again, if you get a chance to read this, it has several articles under this title, you'll find again the idea is with large data, you need something to put your arms around it, and graphs would be the way to help you. So this is the third part of the talk, which I want to show you how does it work with examples. It can take 5 minutes, it can take 5 months. It just depends. We can have courses under each one of these. But before I get into this, do you have any questions? Please.
When you use the word nodes, is this specific for the bio field?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Nodes means any element. It could be a person in a social network. It could be a chair in a room. It's just the key component of the problem you're dealing with. So that's why graphs are widely used even in the history of graphs in many disciplines, in chemistry, in social sciences, in music. So nodes are key elements, and edges are any relationship that you can, you feel like it represents the key relationship in the system that you're using. That's a great point.
And
Please.
no, my second question is, how do you translate context that is like, for example, cultural elements? How do you translate that into context?
I will show you examples. I hope you'll answer this question. But let's assume that you're trying to figure out how aggressive drivers are. That's your so you're collecting, and we compare drivers in multiple cities. So you have data about, again, you have to use data. So you have data about accidents in different parts of these cities. And the data says the number of accidents, how severe they are, whether they have fatalities and all this stuff. And then you build a network of similarity, how similar these accidents are. After you do this, you find that, and actually we did this last week with a group of people in Poland. And after a while, you'll find that there are groups of accidents that are very severe and groups of accidents that are half and half. So when you look at each one of these groups and go deeper, they are all happen in this city or in this intersection, or in the weekend when people are drunk, or at night. So you start seeing what I call enrichment analysis, which is what are the bad accidents have in common. They are done at certain day of the week, certain time of the day, certain parts of the town. So that's the context. How would I know this? Because the other parts don't have as many accidents. The other days don't have as many accidents, or even the other cities. So by comparing what you're interested in that context, you'll be able to generate information. You can say, okay, so this intersection in this city on the weekends, we need more police there. So you can start making decisions based on the data you extract. Does that kind of clarify that?
For the similarity, you have to engineer features. So you have to come up with the features.
Exactly, exactly. And that comes from the domain expert. You have to understand what do these things have in common. Like in this case was maybe the degree of severity of an accident, or how many people were involved, or whether it led to injuries. Think this is how you build your network. And I would try to identify different ways of identifying similarity.
I have a question regarding the method validation. For example, if I have a regression problem, I can use two methods. One method is a simple one like linear regression, and another one is a more complicated one like neural networks. Linear regression, some models sometimes have low accuracy, but the power of linear regression is that I can extract easily the equation and give it to a subject matter expert to validate it or maybe to tune it. So in real life problems, what do you prefer? Use simple approaches or more complicated?
Both, because you need sometimes just have a proof of concept that things work, and you need simple things just to get you going. But if you want to make a life or death decisions, you need to be very precise. So the domain will dictate how critical it is to be accurate versus I just want to get a general idea. Another thing I want to mention that is complementary to this is that it's really critical because this is new to some degree. When you tell a doctor, for example, use this medication for this patient, that's life or death. So that how would they trust you? So there is the notion of validation in which you have to answer questions that people already know the answers for. And you come up with similar answers. So people say, oh, that makes sense because I've done it using this other method. And then the second part is discovery. But not everything you have to generate has to be known. You have to also come up with new things. But a big part of the validation is to be consistent with what people expect. So people will start trusting you. And I hope because of that flexibility, even within this domain, you can have sophisticated validation approach or simplistic and fast. But you need them both.
I'm just asking because I work in the engineering industry and I'm trying to develop using AI to facilitate our work and so on. I thought of
this is actually, I've done this particularly for our engineering friends, even though I don't know how much time do we have because I don't want, I'm starting with bioinformatics, unfortunately, because of that chronological discovery. We started with this, then we did this, then we did that, and then the other two. But I know this is something that I want to make sure I get to it.
I'm actually I'm in the instrumentation of control engineering, so I want to get use of the instrument and also get use of the engineering that we design. So,
do we have like 20 minutes or still?
Unfortunately, just have 10.
I have 10?
Yeah.
Okay.
But actually, after the
So I will not be able to go through all these case studies in 10 minutes. I will maybe we'll pick and choose.
Maybe we can have another talk.
Yes, I would love to do that. Of course, the reason why we started with bioinformatics because biological networks are everywhere and the data is available everywhere. And I'm just going to give you an example and then I switch. So I'm going to switch. Forget about that. Forget about this. So when we start studying biological relationships, we built what we call correlation networks. But it's just a type of similarity that exists there. When we did the bridges, we did similarity network. In this model, what we did, when two genes are active at the same time, they have high correlation. Because normally biological, and I'm showing this because it has implications at the abstract level in other areas. So if two students are always together, then they are highly likely to be in the same area every year. So if a group of genes are part of a common biological function, they are more likely to be expressed, to be active around the same time. So correlation is a statistical parameter. Between -1 and 1, there is one correlation between every pair. But when you start put thresholds, then you start seeing patterns. When I say I'm going to only look for the high correlations, then you filter out the smaller ones and you start seeing groups. And then you say, oh, this group, this element, it looks like it's related to immunity. Maybe everybody else in this group is related to immunity. This person is a reckless driver, but they have the same pattern as this group. Maybe the others are also reckless drivers. So it depends on how this network will materialize. It will give you commonalities between the elements of this group. And the only thing I just want to share with you that with one of our earlier results, again, skipping details, we tried to study aging using this model. So we had mice at different age groups, and these are 40,000 nodes, and when they are highly correlated, there's an edge between them. And then we group them based on their functionalities. They generate cells, they do immunity, they do different things. And we discovered that younger mice has more correlations among its genes than older mice. And healthier mice, I don't want to say young and old because they also have. So it looks like healthier individuals tend to have high degree of collaboration among its elements because things are happening in groups. So when we have more relationships, it means these are healthier elements to conduct the functions need to do. And we were able to have in between. So to some degree, we can have a predictor using AI. Give me the density of the correlation between genes in that network, and I can predict how old they are. And that kind of explains, unfortunately, when we get old, we lose we damage some pathways. So some of our collaborators inside, our soldiers, they lose the ability to work together. So you have fewer and fewer functionalities that are done at a high level. So that's an example of the other. It's tempting, really tempting. So this is an experiment that was relatively new. It's about infectious disease, since we're dealing with infection disease, but it was related to HIV. So these are groups of HIV patients, and some patients were treated and good results. Some patients were treated bad results. And in this case, we are combining data-driven with hypothesis-driven. Our collaborator told us, I think these ones that are not doing well, they are on methamphetamine. Meth, or I don't know if you're familiar with it, it's an illegal drug. Become popular because of a soap opera. So we said, can we test whether it's methamphetamine that's blocking the treatment? So we have conducted, it took 2 years to do this. So we have infected mice, and we have control group that's not infected. We have one that's infected with drugs. We have one that's infected and then have methamphetamine in their bodies, and then they get drugs. And we compare all of them. So we found 2 things. First, that there is a block of genes that are highly collaborative in the control group, not in the infected group. So our initial reaction was that the virus disrupted the relationship between those elements. And all of them were genes related to immunity. And of course, we know that HIV is immunity-related virus. So when we start testing the drugs, the legal drugs, then this cluster of genes that lost its collaboration is rebuilding that back. So the collaboration, the correlations, the similar activities started to appear again with treatments. But with those infected ones and have methamphetamine, that did not happen. So that did show that illegal drugs is blocking the treatment from allowing the system to rebuild its wall of soldiers that was lost because of infection. Very concrete, very visual. So again, that was really a new result. And we were able to validate it. But I'm going to skip that. This application, again, I think I'm going to skip it because I want to talk about bridges. This is basically about mobility and health. We were trying to build a system that will measure how we move using mobile devices like Fitbits, like Apple Watch, and then try to extract data about how healthy the individuals are or predict potential problems from the moving pattern. So we built similarity based on mobility. Skip. So from the engineering, so what we did, every movement you make has a different signal in the pattern. So we can identify unique signals, code them by a code and create words. Each word corresponds to a moving pattern using signal processing. And based on that, we can build, these are words of mobility, and then we can build mobility based on profile. You're walking more, you're sleeping more, you're eating more, and then we create networks.
You cluster these signals.
Hmm?
Cluster these signals. What do you use?
Yes.
You use quick arrow, you use correlation.
So what we do, because these signals become words, so if now we can just compare the word generated by individual X and the word generated by individual Y. And the closer they are, that would be used to measure their similarity.
The word is depends on the samples away from.
Exactly. So if two individuals are walking identically, they generate exactly the same signals, they will have the same coded words, their similarity will be 100%. If they are moving completely differently, then the words will be different, the similarity will be different. So based that, we built network. We had data that's collected in the internet from Parkinson's patients. And again, we figured that each group, Parkinson's patients, elderly, healthy, they tend to aggregate together, but not perfectly, because not everybody, even you're healthy, doing the same thing. And we were able to say, if this is dynamic, it can be a month later would not, because that's it. So you can actually trace down patterns of health levels, identify a degree in Parkinson's to a more severe degree because of their location in that network. And again, this edge is similar. It's really a nice research because mobility is something that is very non-invasive. You can collect it and you can use it to monitor progress or lack thereof. We are writing a proposal to use that to test recovery from outpatients or to measure how people are, the effectiveness of physical therapy after operations, just by using how closer they are to the degree of mobility they had before the operation.
Sensors are on organs. The sensors are organs.
Of course, that's the data we collect. That's the data we collect. And again, it's different type of data. We use, most recently, we've been using it for depression, but I'm gonna skip that. So this is the one I want to make sure I cover. I don't know if you know that, you probably do since you have the engineering background. 60-some% of bridges around the world are not good enough for use. 60%.
Wow, they can fall in?
Yes, they are a threat. They rate bridges based on safety from 1 to 10, with the idea that 1 is bad, 10 is good. And supposedly, if you go below 6, then it's dangerous. And discovered those 60% are 5 and below.
Something else.
I mean, I don't know. And by the way, when we talk about bridges, not just the big bridges, the one in rural areas. Nebraska is a rural state. Sometimes I go to a place and there is a bridge, and you really think, do I really want to cross that bridge? And you have to think, maybe do it one at a time. Safety of bridges. The way it's currently done, that every cycle in the US, that's 2 years, engineers will go there and measure erosion, measure any deterioration in the different layers of the bridge, and then give it that rank or number from 1 to 10, every 2 years on average. 2 years is a long time. Both things can happen between 2 years. So what we decide to do is to build a model of similarity. If 2 bridges exhibit the same deterioration pattern, then they have an edge. And then if a group has lower deterioration pattern than another group, then we assume that this group is safer in terms. And then based on these groups, we look at what do they have in common. So for example, again, since we don't have a lot of time, of course it's a big network, we discovered that coastal areas in the US, in the Northeast and in the South, the deterioration pattern is faster than in the landlocked areas. And that could be attributed to climate change. So when we look at a group of bridges that have a higher rate of deterioration, we try to understand what they are made of, what's the design, what's the location, and to see what the parameter they are enriched in, what the parameters are dominant. Is it the average daily traffic? Is it the location? And then you make suggestion. If you are in this part, then maybe that the inspection has to be done every 6 months, not every 2 years. And you start making decisions based on, the data that's telling you that this bridge is more likely. The other thing, if two bridges are done with the same design and material, and one of them is older than the other, you can predict what will happen to the newer one based on what happened to the older one, because they follow the same pattern. So we got a lot of interesting results in this area, particularly related to materials and average daily traffic and location. And this is an ongoing project. This is an NSF-funded project that has been going on for quite some time. I have a lot of results here, but maybe that's for another time. Finally, the two ones, I'm not going to go into details. We were able to do this with a collaboration with an economist to analyze stock market, particularly when you hit a crisis like pandemic or 9/11, which stocks are likely to rebound. And we're able to identify 3 different types of stocks that are more likely to rebound after a crisis. One of them is the financial group, as you might expect. One of them is the energy group. Again, inflation network. And in this case, how the stock or the group behave over a period of time. And all this data is available. The only difference with this data, you have to pay to get it. It's a business application. So it's available through different sites, but you have to subscribe. But it's still available. So you can track down, and as we did it under crisis, we found out that finance and the industry sector did better in 9/11, and the COVID-19. Finance and energy did better. The last application is related to assessing quality of education. I'm not going to go over that. This is another interesting application, how to assess people learning process and in collaboration with education. But I'm going to skip that. And I'm just going to say that we are really at a crossroads. And we have an opportunity, whether we want to take advantage of it or not. It comes down to our willingness to take on new ideas and our willingness to work together. So hopefully that gives you a glimpse. I can talk about this all day and I don't get tired. I get energy actually, so I love that stuff. So if at any given time I have interest in discussing projects or sharing this with a group, I would be more than happy to do this. Again, this is a large group that is doing this. And this is just a snapshot of, and if I go through the picture, everyone has a different background ethnically and different background academically. So I hope we have a few minutes for questions.
Lots of instructors and students, and they have to go.
Oh, we have to.
But I have to apologize. I think that we should have given more time to this talk. I know that I would have happily stayed and listened for another hour. This was so interesting. Thank you so much, Dr. Hesham. And I apologize to everyone that we haven't scheduled a bigger time slot for this. But hopefully, it's still, we do not definitely we have to do another one. Because I feel that this was just a teaser.
Just
so thank you very. I hope you all join me. Thank you, Dr. Hesham.
Thanks for coming.
And if anyone wants to talk to Dr. Hesham, you can do it outside. Okay, you can do it here.
So the room is available. I don't have to.
I wasn't sure.
Well, the engineering project is with the government, with the local bridges. Yeah, that is part of the. Well, هم دون data وهم كانوا very collaborative actually.